Whew. Whew. We all have baggage that we pick up in life. There are things that happen to us, the regrets that we carry, there are sins that we hold on to. And over the span of our lives, we pick up a considerable amount of baggage. These things hold us down, they hold us back. They mess with our relationships with one another. They mess with our relationship with God. They do a whole lot to us. We've seen this in the story of Joseph. We've been looking at his life and looking at the different ways that people have collected baggage in that story. The bulk of the story takes place from chapter 37 to 47. Now we began this little series talking about the story in general. We've seen all the characters and all the different kinds of baggage that they have been collecting. Last week we talked about the baggage that Joseph's brothers began to accumulate, especially as we looked at Reuben, the baggage that was caused by their own sins. And we recognize that sometimes some of the bags that we pick up, they are picked up by choice because of sins that we want to pick up or guilt that we hold on to. And today we're going to be talking about a different kind of baggage, and that is baggage that is forced upon us. Not necessarily of choices that we make, but because of the choices of other people or the circumstances of life. Some of the baggage that we tend to accumulate or pick up is caused by abuse, neglect, or harsh words, or being used for somebody else's gain, or maybe being a victim of theft, violence, bullying, or some other means. When I was young, I picked up all sorts of baggage that was not a direct result of my own choices. I grew up in a household where alcoholism and recreational drug use were normal. I experienced abuse and sometimes neglect. I was the object of bullying at school. When I was a senior in high school, my mom died a couple months before high school graduation. I've had various times in my life where I had plans, some big plans, and they never worked out the way I wanted them to. And so you begin to collect this baggage, these bags, these things that you didn't intend to pick up, but yet you pick them up nonetheless. Today we're going to be talking about Jacob, Joseph's father. He shows us that there's a terrible reality that sometimes the choices of other people can greatly affect us in ways that we cannot begin to imagine. Now, early in his life, Jacob had made his own bad choices. There were things that he intended intentionally to do, like he cheated his brother Esau out of his birthright and his father's blessing. And some people in today's day and age might say, well, he saw a business opportunity and he took advantage of it. Like he saw this opportunity to get ahead in life, and so he took it. But in reality, he saw weaknesses in other people, and he exploited those weaknesses for his own gain. And then later on in life, not of his own doing, Jacob ended up being tricked by his uncle Laban. He was intending to marry Laban's daughter Rachel. He had made a contract to work for 7 years, but instead was tricked into marrying Leah. And then he agreed that he would work another 7 years in exchange for also marrying Rachel. And so this caused some really crazy family dynamics. You have two wives in this scenario, and that is never a good thing. The Bible does not condone polygamy, despite what some people say. Every time you have polygamy in Scripture, it never works out well. Us guys know that having one woman is enough. We get in enough trouble as it is. Having more is just ridiculous. Amen. All right, we can all agree. Yes, it goes the other way too. Now, in this particular instance, There was a lot of drama that happened as a result of Jacob having multiple wives and their family dynamics, especially when Leah begins to bear children for Jacob. She has Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And all this time, Rachel is unable to conceive herself. So she says, here, sleep with my servant Bilhah, and she can have children for me. And so Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah stopped being able to have children, and so she was in this competition with Rachel. So she says, here, have my servant Zilpah, and have children through her. And so Zilpah bore Gad and Asher. And then Leah starts having children again. She has Issachar, Zebulun, and a daughter named Dinah. And then eventually Rachel is able to conceive and bears Joseph. And after Joseph is sold into slavery, she bears Benjamin. But while she is giving birth, she dies. But Joseph had a special place in his father's household. Before Benjamin came along, he was the favored son because he was born to his favorite wife. And so this caused lots of drama between he and his brothers. And one day, his brothers had enough. They saw some traitors. Well, Joseph came and they wanted to kill him. Reuben said, no, let's throw him in a pit. And then some traitors came along and they sell him into slavery. And to hide their sin, they dip his robe in goat's blood, and they planned on telling their father that Joseph was torn apart by wild animals. As they were plotting in all of this, they didn't care how their choices were going to impact their father. They were selfish, they were angry, they wanted revenge. They did not care how it would affect their father. They didn't even care after this happened how their father would take the news. They just wanted to cover their own hides and cover their sin. And in chapter 37, we read their account of when they go and tell their father this terrible news. At verse 31, they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a male goat, and dipped the robe in its blood. They sent the robe of many colors to their father and said, we found this. Examine it. It is your brother's robe. Is it your son's robe or not? His father recognized it. It is my son's robe, he said. A vicious animal has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth around his waist, and mourned his son for many days. All his sons and daughters tried to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will go down to Sheol to my son, mourning. And his father wept for him. So the brothers, they outright lie to their father. They manufacture some evidence to make it look like Joseph had been killed. And so they disguise the robe in blood. Now, when they go and report to their father, they do not get the chance to directly lie. Now, they did say, we found this robe, which was not true. They didn't find it. They ripped it off him, and then they dipped it in blood. So they lied. But they allowed their father to jump to his own conclusions about Joseph's fate. And they didn't even have the opportunity to lie in that regard. Jacob looked at the blood and concluded for his own what happened. And you see that Jacob is absolutely devastated when he saw the evidence of Joseph's death. He was ripped to the core. His heart was broken about what happened. He was so traumatized that he was thinking that he was going to die from his grief. And no one could comfort him in his distress. And he went through the usual routine, the usual custom of mourning, of tearing his clothes, of wearing sackcloth, and having a public mourning. The word here for mourning is more of the public display of mourning and grief in front of others. So in this instance, he is forced by the actions of his sons to pick up the baggage of their sin, of this grief, of this what if. If only Joseph had not gone out. If only I had been content with trusting in my sons. If only this wild animal had not come along. And so he is picking up this baggage, or being forced to carry this baggage of the loss of his son. But in this, he does make his own mistake. He says that the text tells us that his sons and his daughters, meaning that there must have been other daughters besides Dinah, he refused to be comforted by them. He made a choice to not listen to their words of comfort or to not allow them to minister to him in his time of sadness. I know many of you have experienced some kind of loss. You've gone through some kind of grief in your life. Maybe you've lost a child like Jacob has, or maybe you've lost a spouse, or maybe you've had broken relationships, or maybe you've been betrayed by somebody in your life. Being forced to bear this baggage is very difficult, especially when it's not your own. You wonder why, you question, you doubt God. You get angry sometimes about what goes on. And it's not easy to move on. You can't just get over it. Like some people will say, just get over it, move on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get going in life. And it is not that easy. There is a process of grief that we have to go through. If we don't go through that process of grief, we will not be able to find the healing that we need in those circumstances. But even despite that, sometimes, in a very unhealthy way, we can be paralyzed by our grief. Or when the baggage of other people's choices are put on our shoulders, we can be paralyzed by the weight of those bags and we refuse to move forward as God is leading us forward. And Jacob refuses comfort. He refuses to move forward. But this obviously wouldn't be the last time that he would suffer loss. In chapter 35, we remember that we learned of Rachel's difficult labor as she was pregnant with Benjamin. And in verse 17 we read, during her difficult labor, the midwife said to her, don't be afraid, for you have another son. As if her dying breast, she is supposed to have comfort that she is bringing forth another son. With her last breath, for she was dying, she named him Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. So Jacob was faced with the death of his favorite wife. There's no words to adequately describe what he must have felt. And there was no one to blame. This was nobody's fault. Terrible things happen in life. And just as Joseph was special, Benjamin would become special to Jacob because he was born to his favorite wife and because he was born in such a late age for Jacob. Now, loss, grief, sadness, disappointments, trauma that we experience in life, all of these things are inevitable. But really, it's in how we respond in the midst of those things that makes all the difference in the world. It's our mindset, our attitude that will determine whether or not we find healing or whether or not we continue to backslide or hold on to our grief and are paralyzed by that grief. And we know that we can't just move on always, but we do need to work through our trouble. We do need to work through our heartaches. We need to work through the pain that we feel. And even once we move on and we get past the immediate state of grief, there are going to be times in our lives when we're reminded of our loss. We're going to be reminded of that pain. Now, later on, there is this famine that happens in the land. And we know this story. We've talked about it several times already. The sons of Jacob go into Egypt to buy grain because Joseph had helped them prepare for this famine that was coming up. And they meet this Egyptian official that they don't realize is Joseph. And he begins to test them. He's asking all sorts of questions about their family. He accuses them eventually of being spies. And he has Simeon arrested. And he says that y'all are not going to get anything else. You're not going to get your brother unless you bring your youngest son to me. And so the sons have to go and tell Jacob everything that has transpired. And they request to bring Benjamin on a return journey. But Jacob answered, "My son will not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If anything happens to him on your journey, you will bring my gray hairs down to Sheol in sorrow." You can see the trauma of Joseph's death is impacting Jacob all of these years later. It prevents him from allowing Benjamin to go and help save his other son from prison in Egypt. He would rather have Simeon rot in jail than send Benjamin so that he could get free. His trauma is deeply affecting his judgment, his decisions, the things that he is going through in life. And what is so crazy to me is that he says, basically, if he dies, I am left with nothing. Like he has other sons. All of these older sons of his, they are nothing to him in his grief. So that must have been detrimental for his other sons to hear this. That compared to Benjamin, compared to Joseph, they are absolutely nothing to him. So you can see that Jacob has not moved past his pain. He has not allowed God to bring healing to his heart. It is paralyzing him and his family. Now, at some point, we absolutely need to move forward. We need to get past our grief. We need to adjust to the new normal of our lives. It is not an easy process, but it is one that is required. There are things that God wishes for us to accomplish. There are ways that He can use our pain for the benefit of others. There are people alive today around us who need us to be involved in their lives, but if we are so focused on our pain or so focused on whatever baggage that we are carrying, we'll be unable to minister to them as God desires. Now, despite his reluctance, Jacob would have to learn to let go. He is going to be forced to let go. In Genesis chapter 43, beginning at verse 1. Now the famine in the land was severe. When they had used up the grain that they had brought back from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "The man specifically warned us, 'You will not see me again unless your brother is with you.'" And if you don't catch the tone of Joseph's warning, it's kind of like the mafia here. You know, if you don't bring him, we're going to get your kneecaps with our baseball bat. We're going to come after you. Like, you're not going to survive this if you don't bring your brother back to me. You're not going to get any grain. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man said to us, 'You will not see me again unless your brother is with you.' 'Why have you caused me so much trouble?' Israel asked. 'Why did you tell the man that you had another brother?' They answered, 'The man kept asking us about our family. Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' And we answered him accordingly. How could we know that he would say, 'Bring your brother here'?" So the famine was so bad that they had no choice but to return to Egypt. But the brothers point out this problem that they've got to take Benjamin. And Jacob is angry. And he blames his sons for this predicament because they had been so open with information about their family. Now, if they had ignored Joseph's questions, if they had not answered him, if they would have been vague, had it not been Joseph that was asking these things, if it was any other Egyptian official, they would have seemed really suspicious. They would have seemed like they had something to hide. "What are you asking us about our father or brothers? Why are you asking us these weird questions of Egyptian official?" They would have appeared to be spies. So, of course, they were going to answer the questions. They were going to entertain the Egyptian officials so that they could get grain. This was a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do, to engage in this conversation that he was having with other people. Or how many times if you have a conversation with somebody, hey, good to meet you. Do you know so-and-so? Yeah, I know so-and-so. And then you start talking about family trees and different people that you know. It's a part of conversation. And who knows, maybe Joseph was just knew somebody down in that region, and he's wanting to know about some family stuff. Who knows? Perfectly reasonable conversation. So Jacob was going a little bit overboard in his anger and his hostility because of the pain that he's still feeling. But Jacob has to allow Benjamin to go. If not, he and the rest of his clan are going to die. And so it took some very difficult circumstances to shock Jacob out of his grief, to allow him to open up just a little bit to allow Benjamin to go. And sometimes we need a good swift kick in the rear end to get us going. Sometimes we need somebody to come and give us challenging words. Sometimes if we are holding on to our baggage for so long and it's causing us so much trouble and we're refusing it to let go, sometimes somebody needs to come up and say, "You are an idiot, put that down." Like sometimes when your kids are doing something stupid, they have maybe running with scissors. Don't be an idiot, put it down and walk on. Sometimes somebody has to tell us the hard words that we do not want to hear. Not get over it and whatever, but sometimes it is get over it. But emotionally we know that it's not easy to just get over it. But sometimes we do need to let go of the grief, let go of the pain, and allow God and other people to bring us comfort. What is awesome in this story is that Joseph, as the brothers go and they bring Benjamin, and there's a little bit more drama and testing, Joseph eventually reveals himself to his brothers. After they get over the shock of all that and then they're reunited with one another, he wants to see his father again. His father that he hadn't seen in over 20 years. And so he requests that his brothers bring Jacob and the rest of the clan, their whole families, to Egypt. He's going to give them this land called Goshen where they can hang out and tend their sheep and their flocks. And in chapter 45 we read this. So they went from Egypt and they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They said, "Joseph is still alive, and he is the ruler over all the land of Egypt." Jacob was stunned, for he did not believe them. But when they had told Jacob all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw that the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob was revived. Then Israel said, "Enough! My son Joseph is alive. I will go see him before I die." Now imagine how Jacob must feel in this instance, realizing that his favorite son of his favorite wife was in fact alive. He must have been so happy. All that grief and all that pain, it was temporarily relieved. And then when we go into the next chapter, at chapter 46, verse 28, Jacob has sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to prepare for his arrival at Goshen. He's kind of an older guy, so it's going to take him a little bit longer to get there. They need to be a little bit more careful on their journey. So when they came to the land of Goshen, Joseph hitched the horses to his chariot and went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. Joseph presented himself to him, threw his arms around him, and wept for a long time. Then Israel said to Joseph, "I'm ready to die now because I have seen your face and you are still alive." Man, that is a wonderful reunion. They're hugging, they're crying, there's tears. There's all this joy. The son that he thought was dead is alive. Now, as I think about a lot of the bags that we are forced to carry, a lot of the trauma that we endure, all the hardships that we have to face, it doesn't always end this pretty. There's not always a family reunion where everybody's crying and happy at the end of the story. Sometimes we lose people in life. They actually die, and there is no hope of seeing them in this life again. Or maybe there is no reunion or reconciliation possible. Maybe there are regrets that go unresolved. All of us pick up similar baggage. Maybe not the loss of a loved one, but maybe there are other bags of regret, of other choices of other people or circumstances of life that are placed on our shoulders. There are derailed dreams. There are unexpected or prolonged illnesses. There are getting stabbed in the back by people that you thought were your friends. Or there are sometimes when you're made to feel like an outsider by people who think that they're so cool and awesome. And I'm not talking about high school kids. I'm talking about sometimes this happens with adults. Maybe impacted by drug overdoses or children who choose the wrong path. Or maybe the company that you work for just suddenly goes under. Sometimes it can be so hard to get past these things. But Jesus doesn't leave us alone in our grief. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15, we read this: "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses." In other words, we have a high priest who is able to sympathize with our weaknesses. One who has been tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and grace to help us in our time of need. We are not alone in our grief. We are not alone in the bags and bearing the bags that we are forced to carry in this life. Jesus has faced everything that we face. He's faced rejection. He's faced oppression. He's faced loss of loved ones and close people that he really cared about. He faced being persecuted by crowds of people. He faced persecution by the Roman government or by the Jewish people. He faced having thousands of followers all of a sudden turn away from him when he begins to challenge them with difficult teaching, when all they want is a handout. And he says, you need more than a handout. You need to hear the words of God. He knew all the things that we go through. And he can sympathize with us, not just pat us on the back. Oh, I'm so sorry about what you're going through. He can legitimately tell us, I know how you feel. Yeah, when so-and-so said that to you, man, I felt that. I've been there. I've walked in your shoes before. So we are not alone. Jesus has experienced all of these things with us. But not only Jesus, but you see the early leaders of the church, the apostles, they went through all the same sorts of stuff that we go through. I mean, when you read the book of Thessalonians, Paul is writing them to encourage them because they're wondering about loved ones that have gone on before them, maybe because they were killed through persecution or natural death, and they're wondering about being reunited with people that they have lost. So Jesus, the early church leaders, they have gone through all the same things that we have gone through. So we have Jesus who sympathizes with us. We have people from the past that we can look at their story and see how they dealt with being forced to bear this baggage. And we have comfort from one another. That all of us have gone through something. And we can use that to help one another when we go through similar situations. So we are not alone. And in the midst of all this, it might seem hopeless, but we in fact have hope. We can look forward to the day when everything is going to be made new. When you read the book of Revelation, one of my favorite passages in all of Scripture is in Revelation chapter 21, where he says, this is John being given a vision of what things are going to be like after Jesus returns. He said, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. Those things that separate us from God were no more. I also saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, which is not heaven." New Jerusalem is not heaven. This is a picture of the church, the bride of Christ, coming down out of heaven, from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. Then I heard a loud voice from the throne, "Look, God's dwelling is with humanity, and he will live with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. And he will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more, because the previous things have passed away." So in life, we are often forced to pick up baggage that we do not choose to pick up. The sins of other people affect us. Natural things in life happen to us. Things that are well outside of our control happen to us. But don't let the baggage that is forced upon you hold you back. Don't let the trauma and the mourning and the pain that you have because of these bad things paralyze you. Don't let them hold you back from what God wishes to do in and through your life. Instead, look to Jesus for comfort, and he will give you comfort. But not only look at your situations now, but look to the future for hope. Look to this new heavenly reality that we will be with God, and he will make every bad thing go away. All of our crying, all of our tears will be wiped away by Jesus himself. So look to the future with hope, knowing that all things will be made right, and all sadness will be gone.